So Phil, I was thinking about this and how cool magic is that we have this sort of lexicon that kind of gets used across all of gaming. But one of those things is like the concept of innovating and brewing. I was actually talking to my guitarist for my old band. We're talking about making a new album, and we were talking about in this context how to brew music and how to innovate on music and shout out to a band. So over the weekend I turned 45 and I went to see a friend's band called Wildlife. Definitely check these guys out. Like if you like Bay City Rollers meets Thin Lizzy music, they just put out a new album called Sorted. I got to go to the record release show. It was super fun, but I was picking apart things from some of their songs because they're super fun and like really cool songs, and they have all these elements. And I was thinking about building music the same way I like to build decks, by being like, oh, that's cool. I want one of these in here. Here's a call and response. Okay, I'd like to take almost building it the same way I would build a magic deck, being like, okay, well, I need more permission here. I need some more cantrips, that sort of thing. So that's kind of where this idea about kind of differentiating brewing and innovating and bringing it back to magic, obviously, and talking about the difference between those two things and how we, the wider magic audience, this isn't even legacy specifically, but how those things translate into who we are as players. And I want to go over a conversation a little later on that I had with Brian Koval when we did a coaching session. But what are your thoughts on brewing versus innovating? Hey, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of our Patreon supporters out there. Thank you to the Dirtle Maniacs. If you want to be a Dirtle Maniac, go to patreon.com/eternaldurtles and help support the channel. It keeps things going. It keeps things updated. Thanks so much for watching. On with the show.
Yeah, I think that there usually are terms that are interchangeable a lot of the time. Even though they're interchangeably used, they're not necessarily the same thing. And I guess it sort of can help calibrate what mindset you should be in when you're doing when you're trying to build a deck. I consider brewing to be a whole new strategy. Like if you're brewing essentially a new strat that you think is a good way to combat whatever the given metagame is at the time. And it is otherwise something that is not seen before. Even if it's taking composite tools from other archetypes or different packages, the Urza Saga package or the Stoneforge Mystic package or whatever it is that you're piecing together. But the goal of the deck is otherwise different from whatever otherwise exists. Whereas innovating is updating or teching a known archetype for the given metagame. So innovating is essentially brewing for something that already exists, where brewing, in my mind, is just entirely something new. A long time ago, before I was just constantly trying to innovate on miracles, I was brewing with blue-white ninjas instead of blue-black ninjas.
Yeah.
Because I
wanted
to have
more basics. Remember that?
Yeah, black to basics, which was just blue-black. Essentially, it was, at the time, it was miracles, but instead of the white splash, you'd play black so you could get Thoughtseize for your counterbalance to know what to set up, and then you also had back to basics in that whole shell. And so it was softer against creatures, but it was better against combo, and it was just a given thing. But that was a new otherwise archetype because it cut all the miracles, but it still kept some amount of the shell. But it was essentially trying to attack the metagame on a new axis, and that's what I think of when brewing. And I think that can be helpful for people who like to consider themselves brewers or want to be a brewer, because when you're coming up with the mindset of okay, I'm looking at a given metagame, and I think that these decks would all be soft to XYZ. So let me try and build around and maximize XYZ. That, to me, is what brewing is, and then figuring it out from there. Whereas, I am playing miracles, and I'm really trying to figure out how I can beat Mistrise Village. Mistrise Village is just kicking me in the teeth, and I don't know how I can update my deck to solve that problem. And so instead of playing more force negations in the board, I'm playing Meddling Mage. And the Meddling Mage innovation is an innovation for a given problem, rather than trying to reinvent something wholly new. And I think that if you're thinking innovating as smaller incremental changes, whereas brewing is just whole cloth.
Yeah. So I have two different anecdotes to kind of put a pin in
story time.
What I do for brewing, what I do for innovating it. And this came about when I had a coaching session with Brian Koval, who's coaching me. I'm not coaching him, obviously, which has been super helpful. He's helping us with learning YouTube and stuff like that too. But more importantly, one of those sessions every month, Brian teaching kind of giving me a competitive Magic coaching session, which I'm just trying to take Magic a little bit more seriously now that I'm able to focus more of my time and not have to search for a job and stuff like that. And so one of the things that he had me do is write down my strengths. And I have a lot of strengths and weaknesses for sure in Magic. And one of the things I wrote down was brewing. And he was like, well, is brewing really one of your strengths? I feel like there are only so many people who can write down brewing as their strength. And when we dug down to it, I have successfully brewed like maybe one deck. And brewing in EDH, where I really think I do the most brewing, doesn't really translate to competitive Magic the Gathering. So I was like, okay, we can throw that out as a thing that, you know, I have as a strength. So we kind of change it to innovating. But I wanted to take sort of a definitional approach to innovating and give it in a real life way. And then the same thing with brewing. So brewing is very simple. Create a new deck, right? Like create something that hasn't been seen before, right? I did that during, and stop me if you've heard this before, skip forward 20, 25 seconds or whatever, but I did this during Dragons of Tarkir Standard when everyone was playing Jeskai Ascendancy or Red Deck Wins or Abzan control, like Abzan mid-range. I built a deck that I thought could get underneath of the Ascendancy combo decks, over top of the Red Deck Wins, and through the Abzan mid-range decks. And it was, I called it Red Green Legends. And essentially what that deck was turn 1 Elf, Mana Dork. Turn 2, I either cast Boon Satyr or Yasova. The cards don't matter. It was just that it was a 4 power creature. So now I have 5 power on the board. On turn 3, I would cast Suruk the Hunt Caller, which had Formidable, which if you have 8 power on the board, trips. And what it does is it gives any one creature you have haste during your attack step. So what would happen is turn 3, I would cast Suruk the Hunt Caller as a 5/4, attack for 9, and then I would untap. And of course, then my next creature would have haste too. So I'd play Pelucranos or, you know, some other giant creature, maybe a Thunderbreak Regent or something like that. And basically I had this deck that could just go completely under the decks that were like, oh, I'll just play a little bit of removal here or there. And, you know, like the format was very slow at the time. Like all you had to do was beat Red Deck Wins in the first couple of turns, and you could overpower if you were a combo deck like Ascendancy. Or if you were Abzan mid-range, you had Siege Rhino to sort of not just stay in the game, but like you get the power, you get a blocker, and you get like a little bit of a life boost. So what I decided to do was play this deck that could kind of go in sort of a hole that was existing in the metagame at the time, right? An aggro deck that was bigger than the fastest aggro deck. There were some problems with this deck. Creatures with 2 butts die to whatever the shock effect was at that time, which turns off my Suruk the Hunt Caller. There were some things in the deck that didn't work, but I was able to top 8 to PPDQs with the deck, and one of them I went undefeated into the finals, which was pretty amazing. I just, you know, XO'd the tournament and then got into the finals as top seed, which was into the top 8 with top seed, and I lost the other one in a as like, you know, second place basically. Closest I've ever come to getting on the Pro Tour. So that's brewing, right? Like that's taking finding a niche in the metagame and successfully exploiting it through a new deck that you've built. Finding the right high-end cards for legacy, vintage, pre-modern, or old school Magic can be challenging. That's where our friends 3-for-1 Trading come in.
3-for-1 Trading is one of Europe's top Magic the Gathering retailers with an incredible selection of premium singles, sealed product, and even full sets, all available with free, fast, and secure worldwide shipping.
They add fresh inventory every Wednesday with weekly deals and discounts. So whether you're hunting for that elusive piece of power, a legacy staple, or something spicy for your collection, they've got you covered.
First high-end orders over $500 or €500, use the code EDFREE to get free worldwide shipping.
Check them out now at the number 3, the number 4, the number 1.gg/ED. That link takes you right to the shop and helps support the channel.
Huge thanks to 3-for-1 Trading for supporting the Legacy community. Now back to the show.
Now, innovating, everyone put on your gray beards for a second because we're going back to 1990, maybe 2001. The deck was Fires. Are you familiar with Fires?
Of course,
Phil?
I'm familiar with Fires. I'm
Fires.
also familiar that the number 1 hit single in 2001. Let's see.
Fat Lip by...
Yeah. Okay, you're guessing Fat Lip. You got Fat Lip by Sum 41. Is Hanging by a Moment by Lifehouse.
Ugh, yuck.
I don't even know what that song is.
People were bad at music in the early 2000s is really what it comes down to. Remember, the Strokes didn't really happen until like 2002, so we didn't have rock and roll. We were living in like a bubblegum pop hell for about 3 years, where it was just like boy bands and like Christian rock.
Drops of Jupiter by Train was number 4. So
Yeah.
yeah.
What were 2 and 3?
Alicia Keys' Fallen was number 2, and Janet
Yeah, see,
Jackson's All For You was 3. Now, All For You,
this is that bubblegum pop hell that I was telling you about.
totally bubblegum pop, but like, you know, sometimes you're driving somewhere, All For You comes on, and you're like, all right, now we're cruising.
Yeah.
Song
So,
is smooth.
Fires was basically Fires of Yavimaya, which gives all creatures all of your creatures haste, and Sapperling Burst, which had fading. Was it fading? We're gonna go with fading.
Yeah. Fading is remade it with Vanishing later on, but Fading is the original.
So it's Fading 7. You could take a counter off of it, and then that creature had a power dump that's equal to the Fading counters that were still on Sapperling Burst. So you could basically take off, I think the correct number was to take off 2, swing in for 4, untap, or swing in for 8, sorry, untap, swing, like that. It might have been to take 3 and do 9, and then 6. Anyhow, you could make a lot of creatures very fast, right? And everyone was playing that deck. Now, at the time, I had noticed this red-green deck was good. Everyone was playing it, right? But I also had noticed that the only removal in the format was Urza's Rage, which was a damage-based spell, or there was like Dark Banishing. It wasn't Dark Banishing, it was something similar to Dark Banishing that was like target non-black creature is destroyed, right? And I realized that there was a giant hole in the meta here that I could solve by playing the best deck, but innovating on it, right? And so I went with you're already playing I think Utopia Tree in your deck. You're playing with Birds of Paradise. Why not throw in, because the games are won and lost on a turn. So like really what you want to be doing is having the most impactful like follow-up turn, right? So I was like, well, I can play City of Brass, right? Now I have the option of just all I need to do is get 2 black mana out, and I played Fallen Angel, Phil. Fallen Angel was a card that could not be dealt with in this metagame. Fallen Angel is a 5 mana 3/3 with flying that if it has sacrifice a creature, give Fallen Angel +2/+1, which seems like, why would you play this in your constructed deck, right? It was a card that came out in Legends. It got reprinted in Chronicles, and I think it was reprinted again in like 5th edition or something like that.
Hey, you're talking to the guy who's always in support of somehow getting angels into your deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Fallen Angels even, right? So I was like, great. I play Fallen Angel, right? And if my opponent can't block Fallen Angel, I'm going to follow it up on the next turn with a Sapperling Burst and do 15 damage with the Fallen Angel just by having the Sapperling Burst in play. Now, if I've done any other damage there with like Raging Kavu or Flame Tongue Kavu, which the deck also played, you were playing all these cards that like did chip incremental damage, and then you just ended the game with a Sapperling Burst. Well, generally what would happen is someone would be like, well, I can't make lethal, so I have to play a Sapperling Burst and hold on to it. And then the next turn they would play a couple removal pieces and then attack with as many Sapperlings as they could, right? My plan was I played the turn 4 Fallen Angel, and then I follow that up with the Sapperling Burst, and then I swing in. If my opponent doesn't have a flyer, they're dead. They take 15 damage right off the dome, and normally that would be enough to kill someone in that era. With Raging Kavu being a haste creature, some amount of damage from Carplution Forests or whatever the hell else was happening there. And in the late game, the card was just insane because you could not remove it with anything normal, and you were playing Urza's Rage. So if you did make it into the late game, your mana dorks could then produce enough mana that you could just hit somebody with the Urza's Rage. But the innovation, the thing that we're talking about here, was the Fallen Angel. And seeing that hole in the format, it's always about finding the niche, right? Finding that spot in the format and then determining how best to solve it. You can either best solve it by being like, I'm going to play the best deck plus this card, or these, this combination of cards or whatever, or you go, I'm going to play a brand new deck, and that's Brewing.
Yeah. I think it's the difference is like an innovation can go from a single card, like including Fallen Angel, to try and beat what the metagame looks like at large, or it can be a whole new like swath of another archetype like coming into yours to like boon something. So like if you're playing like if you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to play Rug Delver, but I'm going to splash a fourth color for XYZ that's going to like, I'm going to splash black for Barrowgoyfs out of the board because I think that those are just going to be super punishing in the mirror. And, you know, we can't spend our time wastelanding each other. Like, this is like, we're always going to get to 3 mana and grind your game. And like, my Barrowgoyfs are going to be the thing that puts me over the top of that matchup. That's an innovation where it's like, if you were like, yeah, I'm actually just going to play, you know, black, red, you know, Reanimator, but I'm going to play it with Dark Rituals into Barrowgoyfs instead. Like, okay, like then we're in the is our primary game plan Reanimator? We just happen to have this sort of like mid-range pivot, in which case it's like, okay, we're trying to innovate on Reanimator, and that's where it goes. The mindset is I'm still trying to be the Reanimator deck. I just now have this additional plan or this additional option of a plan that essentially is like I'm innovating to give me a different thing to do. Whereas like if you're like I want to be the Dark Ritual Barrowgoyf guy, lean in hard on how I maximize that plan because I just think fast Barrowgoyfs is a way to attack this format. That would be a brew in my head, right? Because you're like no deck's plan like in the dark every game is Dark Ritual into Barrowgoyf. Like there are some decks that do it, like Doomsday has done it in post board. Like they have Barrowgoyfs out of the board and then they can board into that. That is a post board shift. But it's not like when they sit down at the table, they're still like, I want to be the Doomsday deck. They're like, I'm combo going in. So it's an innovation on the Doomsday deck, as opposed to if it were main board and the plan, then you're like, oh, this is a brew. And now I'm, you know, I don't know if I'm articulating that as clearly as I would like to, but like, if you're thinking, it's helpful to not get too carried away when trying to brew, that if you are trying to innovate, rather than brew, it can help you from going off the rails because it can be really easy, especially when you're talking with friends or other people that are helping you with the deck, to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. Then for them to go, oh, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And what about that? And then like you eventually find your way into like a soupy mess and then you like lose what you were trying to solve in the first place.
Yeah, one of the things I think is also kind of important to think about when we think about brewing and innovating is brewing is very finite, right? Like when you're brewing, you can't like if your deck becomes successful, it might be your brew, but brewing happens once, right? Like you brew a deck,
then you start innovating.
You know, then you have to innovate on that deck, right?
Yeah.
Like brewing is like it is kind of like this thing that you have to be rogue, right? Like you have to be doing something that nobody else is really doing. And then from there, if it becomes a successful brew, what you do is you start innovating on it, which is a great way to think about this thing. So like had the green red, you know, Legends deck that I had for Dragons of Tarkir Standard become a tier 1 strategy that everyone realized was really good. Maybe what would have happened then is people would have been like, okay, well, I'm going to innovate I'm going to improve here or there on this particular concept. I just never did enough events in Standard during that era, and that was really the last time I played Standard to make it to like an SCG event or something like that and like dominate there. And who knows, maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't have. But doing well enough that like I could take a 40 plus person PPDQ and come in second place, there was something there. The brew was indeed successful, at least to that point, right? I walked away with a couple boxes of Dragons of Tarkir, which I still have like uncommons and commons of, just lousy in my collection. There's so many commons and uncommons in my collection.
You got to open up the Elspeth, man. I hear the Elspeth is worth some coin.
That is from Theros, I think.
No, the new Elspeth from Tarkir Dragon Store.
Oh, that's Dragon Storm. I'm talking about Dragons of Tarkir, which was like 2014. Yeah, that was the deck that I was playing in like 2014. Like I said, the last time I played Standard was over a decade ago. Hey, Legacy fans, since you're enjoying the show, please like and subscribe to the video. It helps the channel grow.
Support Eternal Turtles on Patreon so we can create even more content and cover events.
Patreons get an ad-free RSS feed, 4 bonus episodes a month, and Discord recognition. Join the Dirtle Maniacs at patreon.com/EternalDirtles.
Now back to the show.
Which is wild to think about. You know,
I don't know if you watched the recent coverage. I think it was SCG or whatever, where they did some Standard. Let me tell you, man, if you are not interested in casting, like, just actually like, all the Jackal Pup fans out there that listen to that like pre-modern, like if you like playing Burn, Standard is your jam.
But that's how Standard should be. There should be a Burn deck in Standard, right? Like there should be Red Deck Win should be a staple of every Standard format. It should teach people, like, especially people getting into competitive Magic, that archetype should always be there. It doesn't necessarily have to be Red Deck Wins, but like the Burn deck, the like aggressive deck that is doing direct damage and then like trading off early creatures for like, you know, generally losing in the late game. But now that fire design has sort of shifted how some creatures are just good at every point in the game, you know.
Yeah, that not a little tangent, but yeah, I think that like that philosophy of them being like, okay, well, everybody complains when their 1-drops are bad on turn 6, and so now they're just like, yeah, how about 1-drops are good on turn 1 and turn 7? It's like, okay, so then why would we ever play with 6-drops if they're not good on turn 1?
I think that does become the issue with design is you know, as I'm looking at all these other card games that I'm messing around with like Overpower and Sorcery and stuff, you realize that like new card game design is very funny because people are trying to, you know, especially in a new card game, they're trying to prevent power creep, but eventually you get to this point where you're like, how do we sell new stuff, right? And it's very funny to watch that. Like Magic was very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very patient in its early design, and very lucky too, that they were able to go, okay, we've got Arabian Nights, and nothing was super broken in Arabian Nights, but they upgraded some creatures, right? But there were some drawbacks, right? Then you go to Antiquities. Nothing in Antiquities was particularly broken. Like, it was all just like more soup to put into like other, you know, like Triskelion existed. But I'm trying to think, like Strip Mine was probably the best card from Antiquities at the time, right? And then you get to Legends, and it's like gold cards, and people are like, "Oh, I never even thought that a card could be 2 colors," and that was good enough for a while. And then you get to the Dark, and the Dark is kind of right? And all these sets had cards that were later on in the context of the game be very good, right? But the real power creep didn't actually happen until like Urza's Legacy or Urza's Saga, Urza's Legacy. Like, think
Well,
about
yeah, that's
like,
because they decided they were like, what if we just circumvented the mana system in every way possible?
well, yeah, but think about how long that was, like 4 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's
you know,
crazy.
like I think it's reasonable to think that it like, you know, in the first 3 years of a game, you don't like undercut the entire foundation of it, right? Like,
Yeah. It just, you know, like you look at Homelands that almost like bankrupted the game. You know, Fallen Empires almost bankrupted the game as well, where people were just like, I'm done with this game because this set is so bad that I bought a ton of it and none of it's good. You know, vendors were like over purchasing stuff. You know, even Ice Age, which was like the best set out when I was a kid, was not particularly good. You know, like there's no cards now that are in Ice Age that people are like, ooh, gotta have that card from Ice Age, right? Like, what's the most expensive card from Ice Age? You know, like I'm sure we could find out in a second, but like it's,
you know, you're making me think that like the desensitizing of like in that position, like at the time, it's like, you know, you read like show and tell or something, and because like what you're putting in is how good that card is contingent upon what you're putting in, and so like how long until it's just like, oh yeah, show and tell is just a thing and it exists, and it's, you know, it's like then when something else, you know, can come in and break it, like it's like, oh man, show and tell, yeah, like that's cool, as opposed to being like this, how can this, oh my god, like how can this exist? Like I remember for a while it was like when, I don't know if it's still a meme, I haven't heard it in a while, where it's like, you know, what creature can you play? Oh well, no, Bowmaster exists, so you can't play your X1. It's like, I wonder how long until we're desensitized to that, so we just start doing it anyway and then get punished and just accept that that's part of the punishment of like playing in the format in a way that it no longer feels like oh no, like you can't play your X1 because this one thing exists, but you still play your X1 and just get blown out by it and accept that. But it's like, you know, it's monkey's paw, right? Like,
yeah, of course.
I think like how many Esper Sentinels would we be running into if you know, there wasn't just like an overwhelming oppressor to X1s.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway,
Phil,
tangenting, but
could you guess what the most expensive card from Ice Age is now?
the most expensive card from Ice Age,
And how much is that card?
the most expensive card from Ice Age.
Comment below right now. If you're waiting to find out, comment below what you think the most expensive card from Ice Age was without looking it up and how much it costs right now.
The most expensive card from Ice Age, Zach, was the Christopher Rush Brainstorm.
Eternal Dirtles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned. Nope. It is Necropotence.
That was stupid. That was
How much
easy.
do you think Necropotence costs?
I should have thought about that. I should have thought about it.
You got to think in EDH terms, right?
I got to think in EDH terms. I'm gonna say Necro is, let's say, $25, Zach.
It is $24.99.
Oh my gosh,
So
bro!
guess
I am
what? Guess what though, Phil? This was the
Did I
Price
win
is
the game
Right,
show?
and you lost.
I lost the game show because I went over by a cent.
You went over by a penny.
Dude, you got to think about dude. You got to think about tax. Like with tax, it's like we gotta. I think I nailed it. I think I called it. Comment below. Did I win the game show or not?
Yeah. The next most expensive card is Adhikar Waste, right? Which is $24.63, and that's obviously from pre-modern. Pretty interesting to look back on these old sets and see what cards are expensive now. I think because back in the day, Phil, the most expensive card for Ice Age was probably Icy Manipulator.
Oh yeah. When Ice Manipulator was a banger.
Yeah.
I think the Adhikar Waste and all of the Pain Lands, I think they're really expensive. Like there's some things are expensive because of pre-modern. Like you can look at like Parallax Tide. I'm not sure if like Parallax Tide has found its way into modern at all, or into Commander at all yet, because like you can do like Parallax Tide loops to just like cut like important lands, like the big important lands in Commander, like Cabal Coffers or whatever the fuck. But I think that the old Pain Lands go up in price because the original printings with the OG arts are playable in all of the younger formats where all of those cards are memory printed, and then people would just want the coolest versions of them. It's similar to like why am I blanking on it? What's the Angel in pre-modern? The
Lightning Angel.
Slayer. Not Lightning.
Damn, I know what you're talking about, but I can't think.
Morph.
Yeah, the 4/5 morph. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I'm blanking on the 4/5 morph that like has a pseudo lifelink. But speaking of, I actually lost the game to Darwin Castle because he attacked me, and I went to 0 with the life gain trigger on the stack. So a lot worse than what lifelink is. But so that Angel, if you look at like the 2 printings with the modern border and the new art, those are like a couple bucks. If you look at the OG printing of it, it's like $20.
Yeah, it's
people want the OG. The original printings
costly.
Yeah. But I can't look it up because I forget the name of it. But everybody knows what I'm talking about. Of course you do. Of course you do. Eternal Turtles listener, you know the Morph Angel.
Yeah. Anyways, I believe. Go on.
I was gonna say I think like our pre-modern listeners are
Exalted Angel, by the way.
Exalted Angel fan. I think our pre-modern viewers are actually quite accustomed to what innovating versus brewing looks like, because there's so much brewing in the format, just like even in the,
and it's celebrated too. I think that's a big thing. Is like look at Phil Wynn.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what is it? I always forget the guy's name. I want to say it's Andrew Walker.
I don't know.
One of the like solid dudes in pre-modern just comes with a brew every like league, and dude, he got me one time with, this was the greatest like murder ever. He put a pariah onto my Jackal Pup.
I remember you telling me the story.
And then he put a treacherous link onto my Jackal Pup. So all the damage that Jackal Pup deals or gets dealt flows back to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then he just killed me with Pain Lands.
Yeah, I remember you telling me he just like his Pain Lands was win condition. Super sweet. I think like pre-modern also is like when they say like the idea of, you've ever heard somebody say, oh, it's a brewer's paradise right now. I think that like it's really hard to brew in Legacy because the power outliers are so overwhelming that it becomes really hard to find anything that can compete with those things other than trying to innovate on the things. And an innovation that I think is like, it can be very, very subtle, but like a really powerful innovation. I think I played last week at my local, and it was a lot of Dimir tempo. And mid-range decks, like a lot of Nethergoyfs and Tamios and Bowmasters and Barrowgoyfs and Kaitos, like that sort of just blue-black best cards deck. A lot of people in my locals are just jamming that type of stuff right now. And it's all like the best cards, and they're all like, they all provide value immediately. They all are really difficult to interact with. It's the answers that you would need for any of them are so wide. Like your Source to Plowshares isn't going to be good against Tamio or Kaito because Kaito has hexproof and Tamio can like get flipped beforehand. And then like, even if you do that, like your Bowmaster has flash, so like when you time things, like everybody's played against these cards, it's not weird. But like one of my opponents, he was playing, essentially he just added Dark Ritual to his deck, so he was playing what was functionally the blue-black mid-range deck. I mean, he started out as Doomsday, but like most games he's just becoming blue-black mid-range, blue-black tempo, but he's adding Dark Rituals. And so the Dark Rituals, just like on your, like, while you're going Tamio, I'm just going Barrowgoyf immediately. And so it's like, and then the Barrowgoyf recoups the card the following turn to offset the fact that you just Dark Ritualed it out. So the time that you're converting, like going down cards, it's similar to like, essentially like the innovation there is similar to like, oh, if you were playing Stompy, you having like your turn one play of like Ancient Tomb plus Chromox plus thing is why it's powerful, right? It's speed going through. But it's like if all of the best cards are all the best cards and we know what the best cards are and there's no real way to like brew past the best cards, then the best way to innovate is play the best cards faster. And I think that like that's like such a subtle thing, but like so in the weeds. Like it's not like totally obvious that like if I'm only if I only have Underground Sea and my opponent brainstorms and then I Dark Ritual Bowmaster them, like they're not playing around Dark Ritual Bowmaster until that becomes a known quantity.
Yeah.
And so you just
and
get
we saw
all
that
of this.
we saw that tweak in the Jeskai decks too, where some of them were playing one like Lotus Petal.
Yeah, like
to hit the
it's
3-drop.
just like it's even the subtlest of things just open up all of these potential lines of play that people otherwise are not used to, and so you get all of this equity when you first start doing that. If you're the one who made that innovation, and like until people catch up, you're just gonna farm people. And like if you can catch a major tournament like that with an innovation, that's like, I mean,
There's no greater feeling. There's
no
no
greater
greater
feeling.
feeling because not only do you get to be the smartest man in the room, which doesn't happen for me often, but when it has, you're just like, I know something nobody else knows.
Dude, the time, I guess, like you'll tell me what you think if you think that this was a Bruin innovation. The time where I felt like I was the only person who had like solved something and had the best deck in the room was during Grixis Delver when people were playing Probe Therapy with Deathrite Shaman, and it was at the time it was like Young Pyromancer and Gurmag Angler, like that, and True Name
I
Nemesis,
remember
that was that.
and hated it.
Yeah. So Grixis Delver was the best deck, and it was like by far the most played. And I played what was essentially like a similar shell, but I played Esper Mentor. And so I was still on the Probe Therapy Deathrite Shaman like early start, but instead of playing Young Pyromancer in red cards, I played Swords to Plowshares and a Monastery Mentor in white cards, and like would essentially go over the top of all of the Grixis Delver players. Couldn't beat control. Like that was the concession. Like I'm gonna dunk on Grixis Delver because I'm bigger than them and I can just muscle them around. But then I'm too slow to get under like, you know, the check pile decks at the time. And so I'm always gonna get bodied by control. And so like there's this one event where it was one of my better finishes at an SCG, and my only match on camera was me losing to control, which was the concession that I was like, okay, yeah, I can't beat this deck if I run into it. But otherwise, I beat all of the Grixis Delver players. That I lost one game because I punted, or one match because I punted. But like I was X-1 essentially against Grixis Delver on the day on that tournament, and was like, oh my gosh, like if I just run into the best deck all day, I will farm them. Like I like just nailed like this one event. And then if I had just like, you know, played better and maybe had a few more reps, like maybe I convert that into a top 8. But that was one of the best feelings that you feel like an actual powerful wizard when you're like I was on the pulse and I had the idea to innovate something and then I executed on that innovation, because there are infinite ideas floating around. Being able to actually like build it, put it together, and then pilot it through something to a successful result, like that is the mark of a good innovator, or the mark of a good brewer if you build a whole new deck. And like, but that is also the most difficult part of all of it, right? Like we can have all of the great ideas, and in our heads, like the theory of something works tremendously well, and then in practice, you're like, oh, this thing is actually trash. You know, like I was talking to buddy Adam, who's also at the Game Story Locals, and he was like, hey Phil, like I really like how you brew with Mystic Sanctuary, and I was thinking about it, man. Like, what if like with because you want all these lands and you want to be able to like, you know, pick stuff up out of your graveyard, like I've seen you play Life in the Loam. That's pretty good. Have you ever thought about like Life in the Loam plus foil? And then your Mystic Sanctuaries can put foil back on top, and then your Life in the Loams put all these islands back in your hand, plus the additional fodder, so you can like constantly loop like this sort of thing. And I see you shaking your head, and I was doing the same thing.
Yeah,
and I'm like, this is a really great idea, and it sounds cool. It sounds awesome. It sounds like an engine, and it's only good if we can actually like figure out what that build looks like and then implement it and then find successful result in it. Otherwise, it's just an idea. And there are thousands and thousands of ideas that can get it.
It would be so much better if Life from Loan was a blue card.
But like that's, I think when you were talking about like how when you were talking to Bosch and he was like, yeah, there's like only 4 good brewers, man. There are infinite good ideas.
Yeah,
people like
sure.
all like we are all good at ideas. The good brewers are the ones that can like take an idea and focus it and then funnel it into something that can win. Like that's the difference. Like everybody's like, oh, this person's a good brewer, and they just bring like weird, you know, fun chafe. that like, you know, it's like a good time, but it's not like that's not somebody brewing, that's somebody having fun, or like they're brewing in there, but like their target is different. Whereas like if you're looking to be a competitive brewer, that is the difference, is that you have an eye for isolating holes in a metagame and then being able to like attack those holes in a way that is like actually effective. And I think that like as much as somebody can be a good brewer, the real thing is being like the first step of being a good brewer is being able to be good at identifying holes in a meta. Like you can't brew something until you know what you're trying to solve. And I think if you like are attuned to a metagame and understanding how all these decks work and what their weaknesses are, and then being able to like Venn diagram those weaknesses together and then find the deck that can exploit that Venn diagram, that is where brewing is successful. And so when Bosch is like, yeah, there's only like 4 good brewers, it's because that's a really difficult thing to do.
It's
like,
hard.
Not only do you have to be able to like have that skill set of being able to identify that at a large metagame with a bunch of different variables constantly ever changing, but then you also have to go, okay, well, what are the tools available to me to be able to exploit that? And then how do I pilot that in such a way? Like there's all these steps to get to it, even though brewing is constantly like thrown around as a thing. But like to be like an actually good brewer, like that's, and it could be something as like, you could go from simple, like, oh yeah, I'm just building the new glass cannon combo, to, oh no, I'm building like this whole new, like specific interactive mid-range game that can, you know, go under or go over like you did with red green in that one standard.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So with that said, brewing, innovating, which one's your strength? Comment below a time that you brewed. I want to hear about the decks that you guys have brewed in the comment section. We will catch you on the flip. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button. It grows the legacy content ecosystem we all love by relaying to the platform that you are part of our passionate community.
And to go even further, click the links for subscription or to support directly via Patreon to help us create more content for you. Patreon supporters get 4 exclusive extra episodes per month. If you're listening on an audio platform, head over to patreon.com/eternaldurdles.
Thanks so much for your support.
We'll see you in the next one.